Hello and welcome to my podcast. So, P3M with Kailash Upadhyay. In this podcast, we intend to build an informed community through sharing best practices, models, methodologies, framework, experiences, and lesson learned. Now, in this series of podcasts, we have a very important topic, and this topic is building a risk aware portfolio and aligning the risk management with organizational strategic goals. And to share his experience, I have guest Gaurav Dhooper. Let me introduce Gaurav first. Gaurav is having last 2 decades of experience in working in strategic portfolio management, experience of risk management and aligning the risk management to strategic portfolio management. And through his strategic certification and through his data analytics certification, through his Agile, Safe, ACP, and the many other global certification, Gaurav has contributed immensely to this P3M community. So, Gaurav, first of all, thank you for accepting my request to be a part of this podcast. It's really a privilege to, have you as a guest, and I warmly welcome you in my podcast show.
Thank you so much, Kailash, and it's my privilege and honor to be here. And I'm also looking forward to learning and sharing my experiences. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So, Gaurav, let's start the segment one of this podcast where we will be setting the stage, setting the context about this particular topic. Now, for this P3M community, I want to ask, why building this risk-aware portfolio, is important for organization to achieve a strategic goal.
Sure. I think this is a very relevant question before we deep dive into this discussion. So I believe from my perspective and from my experience, risk management is the most important part in any sort of project, program, or even designing a strategy. Now, when we talk about strategy, it is basically an integrated set of choices, right? Where we want our firm to be uniquely positioned so that it can earn superior returns over a long run. And now, when we talk about strategy, risk management and strategy are just two sides of the same coin. So we cannot separate and talk about risk aware portfolios. It becomes very, very critical because when we talk about various projects, programs, they might have their own risk management frameworks, they might have their own risk mitigation techniques. But when talking about the entire portfolio, we need to have that proactive approach, right? It is important that we must have that risk management, risk identification, assessment, and then finally mitigation. So it becomes very clear that what are the risks involved in this entire portfolio, which all projects and programs we can prioritize based on the impact, right? When you talk about risk, it's commonly probability into impact, right?
Yes.
So we easily get a risk priority number or a risk number, right? So it becomes clear to us what is the level of risk, whether it is severe, whether it is high, medium, low, catastrophic, right? Whatever category of risk we have quantified. So in this context, when strategy comes into action, we also need to make sure that what are the risks with this strategy and how we are going to mitigate it.
Yes.
So the entire landscape of risk management is very, very pivotal in the strategy formulation as well as strategy execution.
Absolutely. I think very well said, Gaurav. And I've always believed that if an individual or an organization, if they are not managing risk, then they have to manage issues. Because when the risk get materialized, then they face issues. And I have always experienced that managing issues are very costly, time taking, and it have a lot of negative impact on the stakeholder morale and their alignment with the organization strategy. So it's very, very important that a portfolio manager and we set this risk aware culture where everybody are involved in risk management. I hope it's everybody's responsibility. It is not just a portfolio manager or portfolio team responsibility.
Absolutely, yes. So it starts from each and every individual of the team till the industry level, right? So we have very rightly pointed out it is everyone's responsibility, and also we have to make sure who is accountable for a particular risk. Because see, it becomes very tricky when we have shared responsibility and single accountability. Because the thumb rule is that we need to have one accountable person and there can be a responsibility between multiple individuals, right?
Absolutely.
In that scenario, we have to make sure that the person who is accountable for a particular risk to mitigate it, he should have that authority and he should have complete view and the data supported by it so that he can take decisions. So that is why it is very important to have that data-driven decision making when we talk about risk management.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And Gaurav, see here, I would like to also share when I was part of this company and I was managing one banking portfolio. In fact, this was the first time in India and non-banking organization was allowed to, roll out the ATM, the automated teller machines, and group got the first license. And this portfolio, I was leading and managing this portfolio. Since, as I said, this was the first time the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, issued any non-banking institution the license to deploy the ATM. But it was primarily for the financial inclusion. We were only allowed to deploy this ATM into the tier 6, tier 7, the underserved rural, community. We were not competing with the banks in the metros and into the tier 2 and tier 3. But it was just kind of financial inclusion, and that is what we got licensed. Now, in this portfolio, building this risk-aware portfolio was very critical because managing the end-to-end ATM from the cash replenishment, from the security, from the network, from the because in these rural places, there are a lot of risk we saw because there are security problem. People used to take the entire ATM. So how to handle those security related risks, how to handle a network was always unstable. How to handle that network risk so that the ATM is always connected to the backend server and it is always communicating and processing the transaction. And there were many other risks. As I said, the cash agencies were not willing to go to every day replenish the cash and so that the ATM doesn't get dry from the cash and all. So this is the portfolio where without managing these risks and without ensuring that the entire stakeholder or the portfolio environment, if they are not aware of these risks, it was never possible to, ensure that this initiative deliver our strategic goal. And this was I thought I'll share this example. That you rightly said that to achieve the organization strategy, this risk management is very, very important. So that's great context setting, Gaurav. And let's move on to our segment 2. And in this segment 2, I want to ask you, what are the key steps that will help to build the risk-aware portfolio, Gaurav?
Definitely. So great example from the financial industry since I have also worked closely with one of the US-based ATM manufacturing companies, in fact. So I think, get to that because you know that the financial crimes and threats are coming into picture. So very relevant. Now, in terms of how to basically build a risk-aware portfolio, the first and the foremost thing is the understanding of the strategic objectives.
Absolutely, Gaurav.
Until and unless the strategic objective is not clear, you will not be able to build that risk-aware portfolio.
Yes.
That strategic objective, we have to also understand that the initiatives are very, very closely linked to these objectives. Say, let's take an example. I would take an example of OKR, right?
Yes.
Key results. Very close to my heart, and since I've worked on these type of scenarios. So, say, for example, a company wants to be global and they want to increase their revenue, right? Global revenue. Now, in order to achieve that, they might think, okay, we want to achieve through objective by increasing our, say, average deal size by 20%, right? So now you can see this strategic objective is very, very specific, measured, and quantifiable.
Yes.
Now, when we say we want to increase our average deal size by 20%, it is not complete. Still, we need some time-bound area where we want to define this objective in a period of 1 year. Now, this strategic objective is complete.
Yes.
Understanding of that strategic objective is very important. Now, these strategic objective also comes with some risks. What are the risks which are associated with these strategic objectives, right? So, That is why it is important to have that clarity. And then on top of those risks, you build that risk management framework, right?
Absolutely.
How you will develop a standardized framework, how will you identify the risk, assess the risk, how you will be giving response, right? Or how
Yes.
we basically taking different approaches, whether you want to avoid a risk, whether you want to mitigate, whether you want to transfer it, right? So based on the type of risk and the severity, you will basically assign those specific values to those risks, right? So this comes under building that framework. And then most importantly, you have to engage your stakeholders.
Yes.
Unless you have buy-in from your stakeholders, your strategic objective, initiative and strategy will go haywire, right?
Absolutely, Gaurav. Absolutely.
Most importantly, how you would achieve it, right? Most relevant to the initiative part, you need to leverage some tools, technologies, right? So, for example, if you want some common tools, maybe risk register, right? That is the most common tool where we absolutely all the different risks, their category, type, impact, probability, right? But we could leverage some sort of AI tools, or we could leverage some advanced technologies also, right?
Yes. Yes.
Have some built-in models which could help us in assessing those risks, right?
Absolutely.
One common tool, or you can say a model, is Monte Carlo, right? Where
Yes.
some sort of simulation.
Yes.
That simulation helps us in actually making sure that if these type of risk occurs in these scenarios, how are we going to manage them and how are we going to mitigate them, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Agree.
The different aspects in building risk-aware culture. And then last but not the least, we have to continuously monitor them. How we can basically build that risk-aware culture, which you mentioned few minutes back. So
Yes.
risk-aware culture and that acumen, I would use that word acumen, has to be there while we need to foster the risk-aware culture, as well as there needs to be a transparent communication. So transparent communication means you have to be very, very transparent on the risks, right? They should not be buried under the carpet, right? They should be clear, visible, and until and unless we have that risk-aware culture, so that those risks would not come out. Right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think so, Gaurav, these are the great pointers which you have highlighted to build the risk-aware framework to achieve the organizational strategic goals and objectives. And I could resonate with each of these points you have mentioned. These 6 points which you have mentioned is, from understanding the strategic objective. And you rightly quoted the OKR model. That is very, very important. And even, if I continue with this example, Gaurav, even in this white label ATM deployment portfolio, first of all, it was very, very important that every stakeholder understand the strategic objective of this portfolio. The strategic objective was to, as I said, not to compete with the other banking organization in ATM deployment, but the objective was financial literacy, financial inclusion, so that these ATM machines can be used by those underserved people for withdrawing the cash and doing the other ATM-based transaction. And ensure that they also are connected to the mainstream and to the more financial world, because those tier 6 cities, tier 7 cities, when I was part of the portfolio and some of the places where I have personally visited, I saw there were people don't have these kind of privileges which we are using in the metro cities and so on. And this was the first thing, you rightly pointed out, and I could recollect now. This is what I have realized, that until the project and program team who are actually going on the field by whether installing the ATM machine, whether going into the filling the cash into the machine, there are different project teams and program teams who are working under my portfolio and were directly reporting to me. I always found that, until they are not aware of the objective, because when they were doing the same initiative at the metro cities and all, they were, for them, even if they don't go at one time, it's absolutely fine, because they thought, okay, there can be second visit can be made, and it was easy to communicate. But in these rural places, this was very, very important, that to ensure that this portfolio success, they understand the objective of this portfolio. They understand that we are adding value to those underserved people, to those financially not included people and connect them using the financial inclusion initiative kind of things. And also, that's a very, very valid point you made. Unless those strategic objectives are not clear, I think so, then these projects and programs can never be successful. Am I right to say that, Gaurav?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to add, I think it also becomes very important to understand what is the purpose of that portfolio, right?
Yes, yes,
It is to make sure that whatever choices we are making as
yes.
part of our organizational strategy, they are aligned with our long-term goals, as well as they are also aligned with the internal goals also, right? Because every time you would have some customer aspect as well as internal aspect. You
Yes.
have to balance that portfolio, right? And that's why the word portfolio comes into picture. You have to balance that risk.
Absolutely. And balancing these concepts are very, very important, where you don't just look into one aspect. And that is what I have learned. And in my portfolio management professional certification training, we always say that, portfolio management is performed in an environment broader than the portfolio itself. We need to look not just within the tactical aspect, what's happening between the projects and program and operational activity, but we also need to look what's happening in the environmental influence, how the regulatory environment can impact the overall value realization from this particular portfolio, how the economical influence can impact. So you're absolutely right, Gaurav. We need to have a balanced view. We cannot just look into internally what's happening. And this is where many portfolio managers, when they manage the portfolio, they're only focused on how every projects are managed, how managing the interdependency between the project, and they try to manage the performance of these projects and program and the operational component, but they never try to look into what's happening outside the portfolio, because their maximum risk in the portfolio comes not because of the portfolio performance, because that are the environment in your control.
Yes.
The enterprise environment is not in your control. That is what PMI defines. Enterprise environmental factors are not in our control. We need to study this factor and then plan our strategies so that any uncertainties because of this environmental factor do not impact the overall portfolio objective.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think when you talked about these environmental factors, so SWOT analysis comes to my mind, right? Where we
Absolutely.
have strengths and weaknesses as our internal factors or internal capabilities or internal challenges, right? And
Yes.
opportunities and threats are the external factors.
Awesome.
Definitely, we need to make sure that we are aware about the strength, weaknesses, as well as the opportunities and threats, right?
Yeah, that's a great point you have made. But the strength and weaknesses are internal factor to organization, whereas the threats and opportunities are external. We need to keep identifying what are the opportunities or what are the threats which comes from the external outside the portfolio environment and so on. And Gaurav, this framework point which you have added here, establishing the risk management framework, that is again a great point. Once you have set up your strategic objective, and once you have communicated your strategic objectives and aligned the portfolio stakeholder with this strategic objective, the second point is really great. You mentioned about the risk management framework. I have studied this framework, International Organization for Standardization, ISO 31,000 framework, which is primarily deals with risk management practices, ISO 31,000. And in this framework also, I have learned that risk management should be linked to every decision-making aspect of your portfolio. Am I correct to say that whenever we are, this framework, that every time we are managing a risk, even in this banking portfolio where there are vendor risk, because the ATM manufacturer, there were a lot of risk we have to identify, because we had planned to deploy more than 5,000 ATM machines in next 2 year time, and having those inventory of those ATM machines. So there are the ATM vendors, those any risk related to them. So every decision, selecting the right ATM vendor, selecting the right cash agencies who can make more frequent visit to the ATM to ensure the ATM don't get dry out, and they always have a cash for withdrawal by these community. So this framework is very, very important, where we ensure that every decision in a portfolio, whether we are initiating any new projects, whether we are related to funding related decisions and so on, this framework needs to be very, very important. Until we don't have And this framework, you rightly also pointed out proactive risk management. You said proactiveness. Absolutely. I think some of these principles of risk management that we need to be proactive. We cannot just identify the risk, because this is what I have always experienced, Gaurav. Many times these professionals at the portfolio level, they identify the risk, but they do not monitor the risk trigger. And since they do not monitor the risk trigger, they are not aware that when to apply the risk response plan. By the time they already missed this opportunity and to apply the risk response plan, and then they have to, rather than managing and risk, rather than they could have avoided certain risk, mitigated certain risk, they have to now face an issue and now have to deal with some workaround to fix that issue. So this is another great point you made, that proactiveness in risk management is definitely a very, very important. Right, Gaurav?
Absolutely. And I think there are two reasons to this when you said that project managers or program managers identify the risk, but they do not monitor it. See, the first problem is the categorization of those risks has not been done.
Absolutely.
In any project execution or program execution, there could be various types of risks, right? It could be a scope related risk, right?
Yes.
It could be some, say, delivery or execution related risk,
Absolutely.
financial or commercial risk.
Absolutely.
Is some third party, as you just mentioned about some of the dependencies, right? In the case of
Yes.
vendors or rating providers.
Yes.
Until and unless we categorize those risks and assign the risk owners from those respective teams, it becomes very difficult to monitor and mitigate them, because project manager himself or herself alone cannot monitor or mitigate them. It's a collaborative effort.
Absolutely. You rightly said, this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He must know that what is the category of that risk and to which team this should be assigned, right? And once
Absolutely.
it is done clearly and carefully and diligently, right, then it becomes easier to track those risks and whether those risks are mitigated in the entire life cycle.
Absolutely. Very well said, Gaurav. And this is, I think so, your another point where you made engaging the stakeholder. I think so, if you want to build the risk-aware portfolio, and you're rightly pointing out, engaging the stakeholder is very important. The risk management, again, we will reiterate, Gaurav, that is not just the portfolio team responsibility. It is not just the PMO responsibility. It is not just the portfolio governing body responsibility. In fact, risk management, where even the stakeholder have to be engaged, the customer have to be engaged, these vendor have to be engaged, and they have to highlight the risk proactively to us. If there's a vendor related risk, until the vendor is not engaged, he will not, if we don't create that environment where or he can share that risk, it will be difficult for us as at the portfolio level to identify the risk. So this is a great point. I think so. Step is very, very important in building the risk-aware portfolio, is where if you engage and if you foster the relationship with the stakeholder, whether with your vendors, whether with your regulators, whether with your funding organization, because portfolio is performing in not just under the performing organization. Portfolio is influenced by many other external organizations. Portfolio will be funded separately. Regulators are outside, vendors are outside, customer organization are outside. So we do not have to just engage with the internal stakeholder, but at the portfolio level, these external stakeholder, their engagement, so that they don't feel in unsafe environment where they don't feel that they will be penalized if they highlight certain risks. And you rightly said, putting these risks under the rug and hiding those risks, and those things should not happen. And for that, I think so this is a great strategy which you have mentioned, Gaurav. We need to engage with the stakeholder, and if our stakeholder is not engaged, they will always try to hide those risks, and they will try to, and by the time we have to now face an issue. So great point, Gaurav, and thank you for sharing those, great, the steps to building this risk-aware portfolio environment under your portfolio.
So reminds me of another quick example. Everyone is aware, the watermelon reporting, right?
Absolutely. So, Gaurav, again, one more point, if, I could recollect what you said is technology and tools. I think it is PMIS, Portfolio Management Information System. Okay, these are very, very, and because at the portfolio level, if you do not have these technology and tools, if you cannot manage the portfolio information. Because and the lack of this information, you rightly said, lack of this data analytics, if they are not, if these tools are not there in this, portfolio, information will be delayed, and there could be certain risk will occur because the stakeholder are not aware of what's the progress in the portfolio, what's the progress in the various projects. And I think so, and even again in this large portfolio which I was quoting, Gaurav, it is so many projects were running concurrently. It was without this portfolio management information system. We were using the Microsoft EPM solution where every projects were configured, every stakeholder responsibilities were delegated using the SharePoint as a client interface. We gave some client interface so that people can directly update us from the field, because see, Gaurav, we were sitting into the remote location. Remote means we were sitting into the metro cities, we were sitting into the glass cabins and all those things, and the project team were running field to field, because in a month time we have to deploy 200 to 300 such ATMs, and there were so many things were happening concurrently. And without this technology, if we cannot delegate the right task, if we cannot communicate the status of certain, logistics, and there otherwise they could lead to many risks. So I think so. This is the wonderful point which you have highlighted, that technology and tools can play significant role in building your risk-aware portfolio. And without this technology and tools, your portfolio will be flooded with risk. Is that correct, Gaurav, what I'm saying here?
Absolutely. Bang on. See, the most important thing is which particular tool we should use. Because see, there are tools and sometimes it becomes very confusing that I don't actually realize that what are my problems and what are the tools which can solve that problem, right? Absolutely. So the most important thing is first I need to understand that if there is a case that we know that we don't know. Absolutely. This means that we have a gap, right? And we know that we have a gap. But the bigger problem comes in when we don't know that we don't know. So we have a gap, but we don't realize it. I think so you're talking about known unknown risk. We know that what I know these are right classification model, Gaurav, and absolutely right. Sometimes these are these are the pointers, and these are if the port. And I think so, Gaurav, at the portfolio management level, building this, the next point you mentioned is fostering a risk-aware culture. I think so. It starts at the portfolio level, because if the portfolio level this culture is not there, then it will never be there at the project and program level. Is that true, Gaurav? Absolutely. So it has to be top down, definitely. See, yes. And unless we have that culture from the portfolio level, so it will not go down till the project or the particular task level or whatever hierarchy we have created. But absolutely. I think when we talk about the risk management responsibility, so it flows both ways also, right? Until and unless the specific project or the program teams are not highlighting those risks, how will it build up at the portfolio level? So yes. Take one example from my existing role since I run a risk office. So yes. What happens is my role is to basically have that I play more of like a bridge between different stakeholders, right? Different teams. Say, for example, it could be sales, it could be solutioning, it could be delivery, right? Yes. It could be pricing. So various teams comes into picture. Yes. In terms of risk management, I need to make sure that the risks are identified from each and every aspect of a project, of a program, or maybe a deal, right? So when we are talking about a particular deal coming into picture from the sales cycle itself, right? So yes. It is very important that the risks are not only identified, but they are also handed over to the next team. So for example, if first team, sales, identifies particular risk, yes, moves on to the solutioning, and then it moves on to the delivery. Now the project lands in the deliveries plate, maybe the solutioning or the sales people have left that entire cycle. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Unless we have those specific technology and tools in place which could help us in tracking the entire history of the risks, right? Yes. Right from the sales to the solutioning to the delivery, the risk may get lost.
Yes.
And ultimately, they may come as surprises. Okay, delivery may say, we were not aware about these risks.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that's why it's very important to have those specific tools which can solve your problem. And at the same time, make sure those risks are actually being owned by someone. If you don't have an owner, then again there's a problem.
Absolutely. Risk owner role is very, very important. And many times, I think so, PMI has also very clearly said risk owner is the stakeholder who has responsibility to execute the risk response plan. But you rightly pointed out another point in this framework for building the risk aware culture and risk aware portfolio is continuous monitoring. I think so. This portfolio job is to monitor this risk owner, to monitor the risk action owner, and to ensure that their job is not to execute the risk response themselves, but their job, you rightly said, continuous monitoring, so that the risk owners are available when they have to act or react, kind of things and all. They are very, very important pointers. These different roles needs to be crafted, responsibilities needs to be delegated. They were always engaged with those people, so that they always aware of and I think so, Gaurav, and can I also say that the risk probability also changes in its life cycle?
Also changes because there could be very environmental factors, right? As we just
Absolutely.
or maybe a change in the market dynamics, or maybe the change in requirements.
Absolutely. Great. Actually, this is, I think, so great approach to build the risk-aware portfolio. And thank you for sharing such wonderful point from building the, understanding the organization objective, whether having a framework, engaging the stakeholder, then having the risk-aware culture, continuous monitoring, and these are the awesome. I think so. If a portfolio manager and the portfolio team, if they can follow this structured approach, I think so their portfolio will never be misaligned with the organizational goals and objectives. So really thank you for sharing those great pointers. Gaurav, let's move to segment 3 of this podcast. In this segment 3, let's dive deep a little bit more into, can an organization ensure that risk management actively support their strategic direction?
Definitely. So great question, Kailash. I think it is very important to understand how that risk management is actually supporting the strategy, right? So from the aspect of risk management, see, it is a form of commitment. From my aspect, it is actually commitment. Commitment to the risks which we foresee, which we anticipate.
Yes.
The objective could be to minimize or reduce the impact or maybe mitigate. We cannot completely remove the risks, right? They are part and parcel of the entire portfolio, right? But how it actually helps the strategy, it makes sure that whatever strategic objectives we have planned, those strategic objectives are actually met when we make this risk management robust.
Yes.
And how we can make it? See, risk has two components mostly, right? The probability and impact. And few minutes back, as we talked, that probability could change. And
Yes.
same could be the impact.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So today, say for example, we have some knowledge about the scope of the project, right? Some knowledge about the requirement. Tomorrow, it becomes more refined.
Yes.
The requirement becomes more clear. At the initial stages, there could be more ambiguity, right?
Yes.
So the severity of the risk probability or the risk impact would also change based on that.
Yes.
Now, when coming to the strategy part, it is important that risk management is helping the strategy to meet the objectives as well as why that strategy was actually formulated.
Yes.
Risk management should answer that. Unless risk management is not answering that why that strategy came into picture, I think then there may be a discrepancy between risk management and strategy. So that is why risk management has to be integrated in the risk management plan.
Yes.
And as a result, it comes into the governance.
Yes.
Those particular risks would be mitigated.
Yes.
Overall, if we see at the strategic level, if I talk about initial data points, when we say, okay, starting from that pyramid, if you see, starting from the data to information to knowledge to wisdom. So risk management also has the same aspect when we talk about strategy. Initially, that elements of data, right, gives you some sort of pointers or some points of facts, right? But they do not provide you that information, right? That meaningful insight. When you go one level above, you get those insights. And when you further process it, you get that knowledge, right? How you can apply it, right? And finally, the wisdom part is mostly how you are actually going to apply in the overall aspect of strategy. So it gives you that ability and capability. So exactly, risk management gives you that capability and ability to execute that strategy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And she got this point where you have added integrate risk management into portfolio governance. I think so this is a great point, Gaurav. There have to be an institutionalized risk management approach. Until we do not have an institutionalized approach, unless we don't have very well structured approach to risk management, and for risk management, I think so governance is very, very important. Every governance is nothing but these meetings, this phase gate review meeting, this health check review meeting, this audit reviews. I think so whenever we talk about meetings, whenever we talk about audits, whenever we talk about reviews, I think so they are all talking us from the direction of governance. So the very purpose of these meetings and these reviews and these audits are nothing but governing the portfolio. And I think so you rightly pointed out during these review meetings, whether at the phase gate review or any other form of portfolio governance review meeting, I think so this risk management have to be an agenda item there. Is that right, Gaurav?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are three key points which, for the purpose of these meetings, first, it ensures that we have an alignment.
Yes.
Overall risk. We have visibility, right?
Yeah.
There should be clear-cut visibility on the risk, right? At various levels of the organization. Right?
Yes.
And last but not the least, we need to have that ownership. Who are going to own that risk?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is a great way if we have to ensure that organization goals and objective have to be achieved. Risk management and especially integrating risk management to the governance is very, 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 very important. And we need to ensure that during every phase gate review meeting, stage gate review meeting, we definitely evaluate the risk environment, the risk appetite. I think so. Those things are very, very important, that how much is the risk we are willing to take in anticipation of getting more and more business value kind of things. And also that's a great pointer. Governance structure is very, very important, Gaurav.
Yeah, and then importantly, just one more point. When you talked about appetite, see, it could be taken into different ways.
Yeah.
We have this much risk appetite, that this is the amount of risk I can take, so that I make my organization safe and I do not incur into high risk or high losses, right?
Absolutely.
Another aspect, this appetite also helps you in building additional capabilities.
Exactly.
There could be areas where we do not have that capability. But yes, we want to basically go into that business. We want to avail that opportunity. So this appetite also helps us in building new capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely, Gaurav. And she, even, what I have learned, the governance has 4 functions. And all of those 4 functions can support, such as the oversight function, the decision-making function, the control function, and the integration function. These are primarily the 4 functions of, governance. And whether providing oversight about the portfolio progress, portfolio environment, that can help us managing risk. And controlling, governance means controlling the portfolio performance. That can help us manage the risk. Integration, there are multiple projects and programs which are concurrently using organizational resources and having interdependencies. Those integration aspect of governance can, because I think so, Gaurav, lot of risk occur because of interdependency between these portfolio components, such as projects within the portfolio. Right, Gaurav?
Absolutely. So these interdependencies are very, very important to understand, and they also give rise to new risks, right? So you are very right. So for example, there could be 2 or 3 projects in a program which might have a dependency, right?
Yes.
Unless you complete the first project, you cannot start the second project. So there is a dependency, or you can say an element of risk. It's delayed by, say, X number of days in completion the first project, the second project would also get delayed.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so these are the dependency you're talking about: finish to start dependency, start to start dependency, finish to finish dependency, and start to finish dependency between these projects component of a portfolio. And because of this dependency, there are always an uncertainty, which is nothing but a risk which we have to deal with at the portfolio level, so that these interdependency does not impact the overall strategic objective and the value realization aspect of the portfolio. This is really, really great, Gaurav, where you have highlighted the very important aspect of governance in risk management and linking risk management to organizational strategic objectives, delivery kind of things and all. So thank you for that. And let's go into the next segment with this insight, Gaurav, where I would like to ask you, can you share some real world example and some lesson learned from building this risk-aware portfolio, Gaurav?
Definitely. I think these real-world examples help people to relate, right? And
Yes.
when we talk about these specific examples, so one common example, or I should say an example during one of the projects which come to my mind was with one of the insurance clients, right?
Yes.
In my previous organizations. Their main challenge was migration of data.
Yes.
So again, it's more from the data aspect, but you can imagine the level of risk and the impact it could bring in, right? That's why you're talking about the risk impact, right? So the main challenge was how to migrate data from their legacy or mainframe systems to cloud, right? And when we talk about cloud, these insurance and financial customers, those go up.
Exactly.
This type of risk, the cyber risk, their confidentiality of the data, confidentiality of their customers, and the amount or the finances involved, right? So, in such type of scenarios, migrating data could not be a straightforward or a straight line, right? Or a linear way of doing migration.
Yes.
You have to actually understand what components or what applications can still be on-premise, what could be on cloud, and which all applications should be in a hybrid mode, right?
Yes.
And this actually helps you in understanding what is the strategy or the transformation approach we should take while migrating data from their mainframe systems to the cloud. Now, this understanding will only come when you have that agile mindset. If you work on a traditional way of working, you will simply think that everything moves in a linear way.
Yes.
Right. And that's why this agile approach and understanding there is no one size fits all approach. You might have experienced or you might have done successful projects in the past in a particular industry, in a particular client environment, but they may or may not prove to be the same in another client aspect, right? So that is why we have to understand that industry aspect, their confidentiality, data confidentiality, and their specific requirements, or rather their need. So because see, ultimately the objective is to realize that value, not only just deliver the output, but we also need to think beyond that, the outcome and the impact, right? The value realization part which you just mentioned.
Yes.
Secondly, we have to also understand whether the customer feels happy with this solution or he was happier in the earlier solution, right?
Right.
Whether we have made his life miserable or we have made his life happy, right? These are some of the aspects which we need to understand. And when I was giving that example, so we followed that similar approach and also understood what is the volume of data which needs to be migrated, right? So that volume and their data retention policy.
Right.
And their data retention policy from the aspect of the regulations, because these insurance companies need to retain data for a particular period of time, right?
Exactly.
They cannot purge or archive that data.
Yes.
All these aspects, until and unless you understand from the risk management perspective and what are the laws involved, right? Say, for example, there could be HIPAA, GDPR, understanding of all these laws and their overall ecosystem along with the type of data. So until and unless you have all these understanding, you would not be able to design a solution which fits
I think so. This is a great insight you have provided where highlighted that the importance of data management, the importance of data analytics, and where you rightly said data management itself is a risk. If we don't warehouse the data properly, if we don't mine the data properly, then we may not able to take the informed decision related to portfolio. Is that correct to say that, Gaurav?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the data quality is the most important part, and it initially starts from your data collection, how you are
Yes.
data,
Yes.
how you are storing the data,
Yes.
how you are analyzing it, how you are cleaning it, and then finally how you are visualizing it.
Yes.
Complete cycle of the data analytics when we talk about the overall ecosystem of how the data evolves, right, over different stages.
Yes. Yes.
So the quality of data, and you rightly said that sometimes data management also becomes challenging in itself. And
Yes.
in order to overcome that, one must understand the data will only serve the value we provide.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It is important that quality of the data and the age of the data is very
Yes.
important in order to have that data mining, data prediction capabilities, right? When we talk
Yes.
about different categories of data analysis, right? Whether we want to do some prediction, whether we want to do some diagnosis, right? And what actually we need to know that the entire data which we have collected over a period of time has to have that entire span of the lineage of data, how data has traversed, what is the overall span of data which we are taking into account while making those decisions.
Yes, yes. So that's a great point and great real world example from the insurance sector, Gaurav, and the use of data in overcoming the risk management and how the role of data plays in risk management and ultimately achieving the organization objective is a wonderful case study. Let's move on to the last segment of this podcast, Gaurav, where I would like to hear some practical tips for the listener of this P3M community, Gaurav, if you don't mind sharing some tips
Sure.
through which they can manage the risk effectively in their portfolio.
Definitely, definitely. So I think the most important thing is before approaching any specific risk or adopting any risk management technique,
Yes,
you need to understand the risk uh, involved in the entire life cycle of the strategy, right?
yes, yes,
What is the risk? What is the impact, right?
yes, yes,
There are multiple techniques, multiple approaches. So one has to understand that if we can basically break that risk into multiple parts, right? Normally we call it as a risk breakdown structure, right? It's easier when we make smaller chunks, right? I think it becomes easier for us to adjust and learn from the changes. So start small. It will help us in making sure that whatever we are planned, we are able to achieve it in a very, very agile way, right?
yes, yes,
Then second is we need to engage our stakeholders,
yes,
inform them, but involve them in the risk management process, right?
yes,
That
yes,
we can seek help from them whenever needed.
yes,
But not the least, continuously evaluate the risk quotient of your
yes,
organization
yes,
or strategy, right?
yes,
It will help you in making sure that you plan for a particular aspect and how it is moving in the entire life cycle, right? It gives
right.
you opportunity to make adjustments to your strategy as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I
So
think
these are the great.
from my side. Yeah.
Absolutely. Start small means you rightly said, maybe breaking down, creating that kind of work breakdown structure and dealing with a small work package rather than the entire, the initiative of that particular portfolio and that breakdown of work and then doing risk management at a smaller work package level is a great tips for the listener. And you also added, the role of training, I think so. You said training the people and, ensuring that we continuously ensure that risk aware culture is built where we ensuring people are aware of the risk management practices and the principle more than practices and framework. I think the principles are important where everybody understand that they have a role to play in strategic success and through risk management so they can contribute to risk identification, contribute to risk analysis process, or they can contribute to finding the trigger early and then addressing the risk through risk response strategy. I think so those training aspect and the collaboration aspect are the great tips, Gaurav. And I think so, Gaurav, thank you very much. This brings to, I think so we have already discussed a lot around this, and we can continue to talk for many hours on this particular topic. And but I think so we have set the great context for risk management and linking it to strategic success, achieving the strategic goal. So thank you very much, Gaurav, for these wonderful, insightful, and the tips you have shared, the real world case studies you have shared, the structured approach you have highlighted is really, really great. Those 6-pointer approach is really great, Gaurav. So thank you very much again for being here and sharing your knowledge in this podcast. So Gaurav, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kailash, and for inviting me to this podcast. So it's a complete privilege, and I look forward that the audience would definitely gain insights and be helpful for this session. Yeah.
Absolutely. This will be a great episode, Gaurav, where and risk management is, I think, so most popular topic. And without risk management, achieving organization strategic objective cannot be possible at all. So, finally, to my P3M community, thank you for watching us on YouTube, listening us on Spotify, Apple. Do give love and like to this episode. Share it with your friends and colleagues so that they can learn from this topic, and especially from our guest Gaurav. There's so much we have ground which we have covered. Of course, there's so much more we can do, but I think we did a good, good detailing we did already in this podcast. Do share, do subscribe to this podcast, and please let us know if you want any specific topic to be covered in this podcast, and if any guest to be invited in this particular podcast. And we would love to reach out to this community expert and bring them into this podcast show and share their best practices, share their lesson learned and experiences. So until then, thank you very much, everyone. Please take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav.